Alright, hey everyone, I'm Andy with Piro's Catering. First of all, I want to say thank you to all of you for helping prepare food for the community Thanksgiving meal that we did over Thanksgiving. So this is the person that you prepared that for, and it is a huge help. You guys have no idea how much that takes off of our plate as far as doing. We fed roughly about 2,000 meals on that day. So again, huge thank you for doing the cranberry sauce, cutting the celery, cutting the onions. Saved us a lot of time. So I was talking with Mrs. Gerlach, and I wanted to do something for you guys as like an appreciation, as a thank you. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to make a composed dish, and you guys are going to recreate it. And so you'll have a recipe card in front of you telling you how much, and this video showing you how to make it. So you'll probably want to take some notes because you probably only get to watch a video once. You count me in, or you? Okay, so the first thing we have to do, well, I gotta tell you what the dish is, I guess. So what we're gonna make is called a Maryland style chicken breast over our pepperjack mac and cheese, and then there'll be a little bit of a garnish that'll go on top too. So the Maryland style chicken, really, it's a new form of kind of like a shake and bake chicken, if you've ever heard of that. This recipe comes from my grandpa on my dad's side, and he actually attended culinary school in New York City. He taught my dad, who taught me on how to cook. So this is one of my favorite dishes to make. It's very simple, but it has a good amount of ingredients, and there's a lot of different flavors that go on here. So the first thing that we're going to want to do anytime we're cooking is we want to get our mise en place in order. And all that basically means is gather our ingredients, measure everything out, so when we start cooking, everything is ready to go. And it makes it much simpler instead of having to run here, run there. You know, especially when, like in my industry, with what we do, cooking for large groups, it's much easier when you have your stuff prepped and ready to go, and then you're just basically finishing everything. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get our garnish ready, because that's going to be the last thing we do at the end, but we're going to get it ready, set it aside so that it's done. These have all been rinsed, ready to go. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut a bell pepper here. Now everybody does these a little different. I do it this way. I stand it up, cut around my edges, and then I don't have to clean seeds off usually. There's a couple there, but and then we'll just discard that off to the side. So you're only going to need about half of a pepper here, and you probably won't even end up using all of it. So the first thing we're going to do is cut julienne strips, which is just long, thin strips of pepper. We don't want to use this white part because it's a little too bitter. So we're just going to cut that part out and set it aside. Okay, so I'm going to do this other half here. And we want to try to get as uniform as possible. So again, we're going to cut that white stuff out. You can take your knife and peel that out also, but we have enough here, so I'm not too worried about it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do a brunoise cut, which is basically just means a small dice. We want these to be uniform. So we're going to stack them up, run our knife across, tuck our fingers. We don't want to lose one of them. They're kind of important. Okay, so now we have our bell pepper cut. We'll set that aside. Okay, then next we'll do our red onion. We're going to cut it in half first. We're only going to need half of this. We're going to leave the core end on. That'll help our onion stay in place as we're cutting. Then I'm just going to cut this little end off. It makes it easier for peeling. We just want to peel the outer layer here as best you can without ruining the onion too much. Okay, take a rag. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to make thin cuts here all the way down the onion. Yeah, because we're looking roughly about the same size as that if we can. Now some people will take and run their knife through this way. You don't need to do that. The onion's already in layers. So now we'll just run an onion or a knife across here and dice. Okay. And then these you can go with the peppers. Discard this. Okay, now we just have these cherry tomatoes. They've been rinsed already. We're just going to cut these in half. We'll just put them back in this little container here. And this is all going to be part of the garnish at the end. Okay, so we'll set that aside with our peppers and onions. We know that's for later. And then we're going to take a lemon and we're going to zest a little bit of it. Maybe. You don't need a ton, just a little bit to top at the end. That's probably enough there. Okay, so we'll set that aside with our other garnish. Go aside. Okay, this lemon we're going to use later for lemon juice, so we'll just set that aside as well. Wipe down. Okay, so we have our garnish stuff all ready to go for the end. Next, we're going to work on our stuff for the mac and cheese. So we have our cavatappi noodles. There's some white wine here, heavy cream, pepperjack cheese. We have garlic, butter, and then we'll use a little salt and pepper in this as well. So with building this dish, anytime you're cooking food in general, you want to build layers of flavor, right? I don't know if you guys ever watch food shows and stuff, they always talk about building layers. You want different flavors in your dish as well. You don't want just one solid note. You know, salty, sweet, sour, bitter, umami. Sorry, that's a weird word. But those are the 5 flavors that they talk about in food. Now, spicy is considered another one, but not in the technical sense because it's more of a irritation. But so anytime you're creating something, any of those, if you can hit multiple things on those 5 main flavors, you're going to have a good dish. And so different ingredients though will give you those. Obviously salt is salt. Sweet will come, you know, the red onion when it's cooked is sweet. Garlic when it's cooked is sweet. Lemon juice is sour. You know, fat, protein, those kind of things give you the umami flavors. All right. Another thing that we talk about too, there's 5 ingredients that you can basically take and put in any country and you will find them in almost all their dishes. And those ingredients are onion, garlic, salt, pepper, and oil, or some other kind of fat. Those are 5 universal ingredients that you will find in almost every type of cuisine across the world. And we're using all 5 today. And we're making something probably more of a, I don't know if you'd call it American, whatever, but it's just one of those things we want to just keep building flavors and layers of flavor. So the only thing we need to do with our mac right now is we're going to take our garlic and get it crushed up and minced. So we're just going to take our cloves here, slice them, and then we'll come back and we'll do a chop on them. Okay, so we got our garlic minced now. We'll just set that aside because that'll be for our sauce. So the next thing we're going to do is get our breading stuff set up for this chicken. So we have flour, breadcrumbs, and then we'll have eggs for an egg wash. Dry, wet, dry as far as the breading system goes. Okay, and then the amounts of the flour and breadcrumb and stuff is going to be on the recipe list. So on the flour, we're just going to do a little bit of salt and a little bit of pepper. Just take a fork and whip that in there. Okay. And then on the breadcrumbs, in here I have steak seasoning, garlic powder, rosemary, and parsley. Now this is all also going to be on the recipe card, so you'll know how much to actually put in there. Make sure you get all that out. Okay. And we'll just take a fork, work this around a little bit, get it mixed good. Okay, and what we're doing here, you know, like you said, we're breading this, so each component is going to be seasoned because we want to build those layers of flavor, different layers. Okay, so those are ready. Then we'll do our eggs here. I got 3 eggs. Just gonna crack them right into our bowl. Okay, so get them cracked, then we're gonna whisk them up. Okay. And then we have this Cajun seasoning that we always put into our egg wash for different things. Right? Okay, so next we're gonna take our chicken First we want to kind of inspect it. Any of this like white skin stuff and whatnot, we want to remove, okay? Feel around it, make sure there's no bones. See right here, there's a little bone left on. Factory don't always get those, so we just want to make sure we clean these up a little bit because nobody wants to bite into that. And then we're gonna cut this little piece off on the end here because it's so thin, it's just gonna burn anyways. So kind of making a little uniform, but see, it looks pretty good. There's a little bit more left here. We're just gonna cut that off. The rest of it looks pretty good, so we'll just set that here for now. Okay. Okay, so now that we got our chicken cleaned up here, we're gonna bread it. So we go flour, egg, breadcrumb. And then once we get done with this, we'll tear this stuff down, sanitize, and then we'll start cooking finally. Okay, so we're gonna keep one hand dry, one hand wet. That way you don't get all gummy. So the flour, it's very light. Roll it around, shake it off, really good. And then in your eggs. Now we got our wet hand. Coat it all the way in the egg. Okay. And then you want to let the excess drip off again. Okay, now we do our breadcrumb. Now we go back to our dry hand. Just push it around. So you want to coat this really well. And then you kind of want to pat it on there too a little bit. It'll help it stick better. Okay, take the extra, just kind of pat it around a little bit. Okay, and there we go. That's that simple. Okay, so now we're gonna start cooking. So first thing we want to do is got a pot of water over here. I got it on about medium heat right now for our noodles. So those we're going to be dropping here in a little bit, but I want the water to start warming up as we're doing our chicken. So when it's time to cook the noodles, it won't take as long to get that water to a rolling boil. Okay, so I just got a skillet on here. It's on about medium-high heat. We're going to add our oil. Now we want enough to cover the pan. There's really no precise amount here, so it's really going to depend on the size of your skillet. So what we're doing is we're just pan frying this chicken, and then we're going to finish it in the oven. Okay, so you should be able to like see there's enough in there. Okay, that's probably good. So now we're just gonna wait, we'll let this oil get hot, and then we'll test it before we drop our chicken to make sure that it's hot enough. Okay, oil's ready. A good way to test that, just take a little bit of your flour. You see how it's kind of sizzling there a little bit, so we should be good to go. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna pan fry these on each side. We'll do one at a time. We don't want to crowd the pan. Then after they brown enough, we're going to put them on this rack, and they're going to go in the oven to finish cooking. Now, the reason we use that rack is we get a more even cook in the oven, so it's, you know, there's air that can get underneath of it. If you don't have one of those, you can just use a regular pan too. It'll work fine, but we'll end up getting a little better cook on it with using that rack. So you can see this browns up pretty quick. You want to give it just a touch longer. And anytime you're messing with oil like this and you lay something in, always lay it away from you. So if it does splash up, it'll splash that way and not towards you. So that's the kind of the color we're looking for right there, is this nice golden brown. And then we'll give it another, a little bit longer here, and then we'll be able to pull it. Okay, so we're good now. We're gonna let this drain a little bit like this. And we'll just put it right on a rack. And then we'll do this next one. Again, we're going to lay away from you so we don't splash ourselves. Just trust me, grease burns are not fun. Okay, so next we're going to do our cheese sauce. Right now our chicken is pan fried, and we got it sitting on that sheet pan waiting to go in the oven. We'll put that in the oven once our sauce is done, and then at that same time when the chicken goes in the oven, we'll cook our noodles. So we turned our water on high so that can get to a rolling boil. So first on our sauce, so we have 1 ounce of butter. We're going to melt that down first into our saucepan here. And we're on about a medium heat right now, so we don't want this to burn. So it'll take a little second here to get this all melted. Next, we got our 3 cloves of garlic that we minced earlier. Just dump them right in. Okay, still on about a medium heat right now. And we just want to saute this garlic for about a minute or two. Let some of that aroma come out of it. While we're doing that, we're going to add a pinch of salt as well. Again, like I said, we want to build layers of flavor here. And then we'll also just do a small amount of pepper. So we're just letting that kind of saute a little bit here. And you'll kind of know, you'll start to really, pause it. Okay, so our garlic is close now. Now we're going to turn our heat all the way up. We've got 1 ounce of white wine. We're going to add that in, let that cook a little bit. So what we're doing here is we want to make sure this alcohol cooks out. Because we just want to taste the wine, we don't want to taste the alcohol part. That don't take too long, a minute or two. Starting to froth, you can kind of see that. Just, okay. Okay, so now that we've got that working, we're going to juice our lime. Just half a lime is all it needs. Sorry, lemon. I called it a lime for it. Okay, so let that work a little bit more. And I use this strainer here just so we don't end up with seeds in there. Okay, so that should be good. Now we'll add our cream. And I think we've got about 1.5 cups of heavy cream. Okay. And now what we're going to try to do here is we're going to simmer this over this heat, and we're going to turn our heat back down a little bit. We don't want to burn this. Okay, just kind of keep stirring. We want to get this cream hot enough where it's almost boiling, and then we'll start dumping in our cheese a little at a time, and that'll melt in to make our sauce. Okay, so again, we're just kind of waiting now. We're just keep stirring, because if you let this sit, it'll scorch on the bottom. Now cream, you can let go a little longer versus like if you were using milk right now. Milk scorches a lot faster than cream does. Okay, so you can kind of see now we're bubbling up here a little bit. So I'm going to start slowly adding a little bit of this cheese at a time and start incorporating it here. I'm going to pull it off the heat as I do that too. Just like I said, we don't want to scorch this because that's a very distinct flavor that you don't want. Okay, and then as I get it incorporated a little bit, put it back on, turn this back down a little bit. Okay, and add more cheese. It's going to take most of this. It might not take all of it. You just kind of have to add a little at a time, and then you just, you're looking for a certain consistency. Now, okay, so again, we're just slowly adding cheese here. One thing that's nice about this sauce is it's actually a gluten-free sauce because we don't have any flour or wheat or anything like that in it. We're using the cheese basically to thicken it. Some people, when they make a mac sauce, they'll make a roux, which is flour and fat, equal parts, and that's usually used as a thickener. But we're just going to use the cheese as a thickener, keep this gluten-free, even though the noodles have gluten, but you could use gluten-free noodles too if you wanted. If you're in this industry, you'll learn there's a lot of things that change every day. And one of the biggest things that's happened is over the last 5-10 years, there's been a lot more of the allergy stuff that you have to pay attention to when you're cooking. There's more vegans, there's more vegetarians, there's more gluten intolerant people. There's always the peanut allergies, shellfish allergies. There's just a ton of things, and they're all becoming more and more common. All right, we're getting pretty close here. It's kind of starting to stick. We're just going to go ahead and add the rest of this in. And this was 3 cups of cheese, I believe, or maybe 2.5. It's on the recipe card. Usually when I cook, I just eyeball and I go off a feel. So really writing this recipe out and stuff, it was actually kind of hard for me. But I've got it written down and it should come out pretty good. So we're just looking for a certain consistency. We want to make sure all that cheese is incorporated. And then we'll set this aside and it'll stay pretty warm for a while. You can tent it with a little piece of foil or something if you want to make sure it stays warm while our pasta cooks and stuff. But yeah, we're right there now. So we're going to shut this off. Okay, so our sauce is done. Now we're going to taste it. We want to taste as we're cooking. Things that we can. Obviously, we're not going to taste raw chicken. But on our sauce here, we'll just dip a little, take a taste. It's good. Sometimes you might need more salt, you might need more acid, you might need more pepper. But I feel like this is pretty good, so we're just going to leave it and cover it. Okay, so sauce is done. Chicken we just put in the oven, 350 degrees. Now all ovens vary, so it's probably going to take 5-10 minutes. We'll get to that, but we're going to pull it out later. We'll check it, we'll temp it, make sure it's where it's supposed to be. Okay, so next we're going to cook our pasta while our chicken's cooking. Water's rolling boil, salt it like the ocean. Okay, I know that seems like a lot, but trust me, it takes that much. And then we're just gonna go in with our noodles. And we're gonna cook them to little, what they call al dente, where there's still a little chew to them. Because when you put them in the sauce and stuff, it's gonna break the noodle down a little bit more too. But you don't wanna make sure, you wanna make sure that they're still cooked though, because you don't wanna serve raw pasta. Okay, so our noodles are done. Chicken's out of the oven, we're resting it. We wanna let that sit for a good 3-5 minutes. Because we want all those juices to kind of relax so they don't run out when we cut into it. So next we're just gonna take our sauce here. Now I mix mine in a bowl because I don't wanna waste any extra sauce. Because we need to reserve a little bit to go on top of the chicken when we plate. So we're just gonna ladle some in here. Stir it around. And this honestly, you can, I like it a little more saucy so it's not dry. And then as this sits for a couple minutes, when we finish our garnish, it'll set up nice. And we did not rinse our noodles. We just drained them and went right into this bowl because you want that starch to help adhere to the sauce. Okay, so I add a little more there so you can kind of see there's extra. And we're just gonna set this aside now and cover it as we finish our garnish. Okay, so now we're gonna do our garnish quick. So we're just gonna put a little bit of oil in our pan here. It's on a pretty medium-high heat. We wanna saute these pretty quick. Pan's not quite hot enough yet. Just wait a second. Okay, so now our pan's hot. We got a little bit of oil in here. We're gonna drop our peppers and onions first. And we're not gonna end up using all of these. You'll see them. We're just gonna give them a little toss. Sprinkle a little bit of salt and pepper on them. Okay, so we want to saute these first for about a minute or two. We want to get them a little tender before we add those tomatoes, because those tomatoes ain't gonna take long. Those we just want to get to the point where they're blistered, so they still hold their texture. But that acid from those is gonna help cut through a lot of that fat from the mac and cheese and the chicken and everything. Okay, so we're still sauteing here. I'm gonna add just a touch more oil. And then we're gonna drop our tomatoes in. Saute a little bit. Okay, so garnish is done, mac is done, chicken's done. Chicken's rested. So now when we cut this, we want to kind of go at an angle. Okay. See that? In about 5-6 pieces, depending on how big you want to cut them. Okay. I have gloves on now because this is ready to eat. Earlier I wasn't wearing gloves because all the things we were doing, we were cooking. So you technically don't have to wear gloves, but you can. Okay, so now we're gonna plate up here. So we're gonna mac and cheese. Looks like it's set up pretty good. Okay. Just kind of put that in the middle. See that extra cheese on there? That's not gonna hurt anything. Okay. Then we'll take our chicken. We're gonna fan it out a little bit. Just go right across the middle. Okay. And then our garnish, we just want a little bit of this. It doesn't take much. Probably about 3 tomatoes with this other stuff right on top. And then that lemon zest that we had earlier, we're just gonna sprinkle a very little bit. Just add a little more freshness. There you go, that's it. Pepper jack mac, Maryland chicken with the tomato pepper garnish.